I have created the component SimpleAlertView in a dynamic way, but I need the inputs to pass from outside the title and message fields that must be shown here. So I go to AppComponentTS. Remember that the reference to the dynamic component is stored in the SimpleAlert property, whose type is ComponentRef. And one of the ComponentRef features is that I can get the instance of the dynamic component, so I will set the title and message through the component instance created on runtime. I move to the AfterContentInit method where I create the component, and I set the content here. This.SimpleAlert.instance.title equals timer ended, and this.SimpleAlert.instance.message equals your countdown has finished. I want to console log also the content of the instance, so console log this.SimpleAlert.instance. I save this and I go to my browser to see the results. I click play to start the countdown, and when it completes, I can see now the title and message content I've just set. Let me show you one thing. If you see the console output where I'm logging the SimpleAlertView component, you can see those two inputs but also the visible property set to false. This is something interesting. In the SimpleAlertView I've got here, there are two inputs, but I'm creating the component dynamically, so it's not written in a template, and thus I'm not binding stuff to those inputs using the Angular templating syntax. What I mean is that using dynamic components to modify the component properties, I only need them to be public, but I don't need them to be decorated with the input decorator, as I won't be doing any property binding on the template. So I could be able to remove this at input and my code will work fine as well. But of course, it is recommended to use it so the component can be built in both dynamic and classical ways. And what about outputs? Well, let's create one and see what happens. I'm going to create an output here in order to emit an event every time my SimpleAlertView component is closed. Add output on dismiss. This is of type eventEmitter that emits a void event, and this equals a new eventEmitter, also returning a type void. I've got my event and I have to use it here in the dismiss method after the visible false. This.onDismiss.emit in order to emit the event. I can see this into the browser now. The console output shows the onDismiss property of the type eventEmitter. Remember that to use outputs in the template, you grab the output with parentheses in order to bind to them. This way you subscribe to the output events. Now, as you're creating the component from code, that option is not available. What you can do is to simply subscribe to the eventEmitter because an eventEmitter inherits from the observable class. If you inspect the SimpleAlertView component, onDismiss have a prototype and inside we can find the subscribe method. Okay, so to do some kind of event binding to the dynamic component, I need to go to my AppComponentTS and inside AfterContentInit, I'm gonna subscribe to this observable. This.SimpleAlert.instance.onDismiss.subscribe. And inside I pass an arrow function just to console log something like dismissed. Okay, back to the browser. If I click play, I can wait until the countdown ends and the alert is shown. And when I close it, I can see how the dismiss text is written into the console log, so the event has been fired. In fact, like inputs, the usage of the output decorator is not necessary at all in this scenario because as the component is built dynamically, there's no template to bind. And I could go to SimpleAlertView component and remove this output decorator and the code would work fine. However, it is more convenient to use the decorator so you can use the component in both dynamic and classical ways. Let me summarize this a little bit. As you can see, I can access the public properties of the component no matter if they use input or output decorators, because they are available on the instance returned by my dynamic component reference. This way, I can set the title, message, and even subscribe to the eventEmitter onDismiss to do some stuff when the event is fired.